Hi guys, some explosive news last night. A court in the US has blocked Donald Trump's tariffs. This is because, according to it, the president doesn't have the authority to impose the import tax. This is reserved for Congress. This is huge. Remember, tariffs has been a core policy of the administration. It will be like a future Farage government being defeated on immigration. The BBC here reports that the president is appealing the ruling, but it has already saw a boost in the markets and the value of the dollar. However, will Trump be successful in overturning the court's decision?
The US Court of International Trade blocking President Trump's tariffs, those import taxes that he imposed on goods coming into America from other countries. 3 judges said the president had overstepped his authority and legal powers did not give him the right to impose those charges in the way he did by himself, even if, as he said, it was a national emergency. That power lies with Congress. Now, within minutes of the court ruling, the White House lodged an appeal. So what does this mean in practice? Well, in short, a lot more uncertainty, including for any UK firms that do business in America. The BBC understands there will be no change at the border just yet because that appeal has been lodged. Those tariffs, the import taxes, which stand at 10% for most countries, which President Trump introduced, will still have to be paid. That includes that 10% on most goods the UK sells to US firms, with certain exceptions. But the developments overnight have prompted some immediate relief on global financial markets. Remember, those have been on a roller coaster ride since President Trump announced the sweeping tariffs back in April. Overnight, stock markets rose in Asia and the US dollar also strengthened. That indicates that investors and businesses feel optimistic that this ruling could help boost international trade. But of course, that depends on what happens next, where the higher courts, potentially including the US Supreme Court, will hear the appeals, whether they side with President Trump or they back this initial decision that throws a key part of international trade policy of the world's biggest economy into really serious doubt.
I think we're going to have to wait and see the ruling of the Supreme Court, because I believe this is actually going to go to the Supreme Court. And we don't know how it's going to rule, even though a majority on the Supreme Court is conservative. So a majority is on the side of the Republican Party and generally Donald Trump. But we saw recently, when it came to sending people to a gulag in El Salvador, the Supreme Court backed a lower court in instructing Donald Trump to facilitate the return of Garcia, if you remember that story. So the Supreme Court isn't always going to rule in favor of Donald Trump. It has demonstrated so recently. So it's possible that the Supreme Court once again doesn't rule in favor of Donald Trump. But we don't know how that's going to pan out. It's possible that the Supreme Court will say, yes, Donald Trump is right. Donald Trump has the power to do this. So it could dismiss the ruling of the lower court. But once again, as reported here, it creates massive uncertainty because the tariffs are still in place. The tariffs could be removed, but we don't know yet. But if the Supreme Court rule against Trump, then I think it would reduce the uncertainty, because you would see now that the president has to follow the ruling of the Supreme Court. Now, some are saying that it's not really about the president, it's about the agencies that are putting in place these tariffs. So Donald Trump may say, well, I'm going to ignore the ruling of the Supreme Court, but it's his administration that will actually have to follow it. So it's not so much about Donald Trump issuing executive orders or tariffs or whatever. It's more about the actual functioning government. So it's possible that the Supreme Court will rule in favor of Trump and then we're back into this mess, or it could rule against him and then we're going to see a little bit of stability, at least. Well, perhaps actually in the long term, because it will say that Trump doesn't have this power. He can't try and rule it. He can't try and impose tariffs again. And then we'll have some stability. But we'll have to wait and see. This is really damaging to Trump either way. It shows that what he's doing is damaging to the US economy, damaging to US trade, and he doesn't have the authority to overrule Congress. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.